Everybody, today we're going to show you how to set up and load a project using Cohler Classical. This is the case where you receive files from somewhere else and you want to load them in. The key is the first step. Make sure that you name your files according to the Cohler Classical naming scheme, which is your file names have to start with an alpha character. They can be followed by any number of alpha numerics, spaces, underscores, or hyphens, and then end with an underscore and a 1 to 3 digit take number. So the file name tells you what track it is or what microphone it is and what the take number is. So this is the clarinet track, take 89, clarinet track, take 90, etc. And here's double bass 1, take 10, double bass 1, take 11, and so on. So these files are already named correctly. If you don't have your files named this way and you need to rename them, you can get a renaming utility. There are many of them, and I'll show you how to do that in another video, but it's very simple to rename thousands of files in a few seconds. So once you have your files named correctly, you're ready to load into Cohler Classical. So it's basically a 3-step process under the options menu, or 4 steps I should say. We first set the load path. That's the directory we're going to load from. Then we go to initial setup. We're going to create tracks step, and then next step we're going to set the mixer layout, and third step we're going to create the source groups. The mixer layout, of course, is optional. You can leave it at whatever you want, but that's a helpful thing. And the make folder command is a command that we use in this process. So basically you're creating tracks and creating source groups. Once the so let's do that. We'll start with set load path, and we'll go choose that directory that I just showed you, Copeland Appalachian Spring. Here are the audio files. Choose that. Okay, my media directory load path is set. Now we're going to go to options, initial setup, create tracks. That goes and looks at the directory and puts the file names into tracks. So you can see they've already been loaded. There are 15 tracks there. And there's a hidden destination track above them. I'm going to unhide it so that we can see it as we're doing the organization here. So if we go to navigation, show hide tracks folder, you'll see there's the destination. That's the group folder for the destination group. And we're going to create some tracks to organize these tracks into. So I'm going to create 5 or 6, 1, 2. Oh, and I'll turn on the keystroke display so you can see as I do this. Command T is what you use to create tracks. So I'll create 5 or 6 tracks here. And now let's name them. The first is going to be my general edit mix, the overall mix. Hit tab. The next will be my main microphones, then the winds, then the piano, and the strings, and finally a reverb channel. Okay, now that we've created those, we're going to put the tracks inside those. We're going to make those into folders. So the clarinet and bassoon, for example, those are winds. So I'm going to drag those up into the center of the winds track. The cursor goes right to the center. That causes it to put it underneath. It makes the winds into a folder and puts those inside. Okay, the double bass is a string. So I'm going to drag that to the center of the strings track. There it is. Flute is another wind. So I'm going to grab that up to the winds track. And I'm going to put clarinet before bassoon, so it's in the correct score order. Then outrigger is one of my main microphones. So I'm going to drag that to the center of the main track. There it is. Piano close and far are the 2 pairs on the piano. Drag that up to the center of the piano track. And then tree, center, left, and right are main mics. So I'm going to drag those up to the main center here. And I like to have left channel first, so I'll put that first. And then these are the other strings, viola, cello, and violins. And then we're going to put them in order, so the violins go first, the violas next, and the cello bass. So those are all in order. Now, then everything from edit mix, everything below edit mix is part of the edit mix down to reverb, except for the live mix. So I'm going to select all of those and then use this command, options, initial setup, make folder, to push those all of it inside edit mix. So you see it just pushed those down one level. So edit mix contains main, winds, piano strings, and reverb, and they contain the tracks inside of them. And live mix is at the same level as edit mix underneath destination. So our hierarchy is all set to go. The reverb track is not going to contain audio, so we want to make that invisible. So we right click on the reverb track, go to visibility, and say hide selected tracks. So the track still exists, it's just hidden so that it won't get audio put into it. So there, the track setup is all set to go. If we look at the mixer now by doing Command M, it's all one big flat hierarchy, which is not very easy to deal with. So if you execute my command on the options menu, initial setup, set mixer layout, it does that. So now everything's in a hierarchy. You got destination, which contains edit mix, which contains main. Main contains these 4 mics. Winds contains these 3, etc. And you can double click on any group to hide the things inside the group. So there you have it. Main, winds, piano, strings, and reverb. Live mix is the same level as edit mix. And both of those go up into destination. And for now, we probably want to mute the live mix because we'll be working on the edit mix, right? Okay, so that's all set to go. So now we're ready for the last step, which is to create the source groups. So you go to Options, Initial Setup, Create the Source Groups. One click, it warns you in case you have stuff already there, which we don't, and you're done. So now it's created 9 identical copies of the destination group. And if we look at the mixer and we go, there's the destination mixer, source 1 mixer, source 2 mixer, source 3, they're all the same, okay? All identical. This is critical. This is what allows us to drag and drop items into any group and they sound the same, and that's what allows us to then do our source destination editing. So at this point, we're ready to, of course, you probably would want to go and do all of your pans and maybe some EQs and other things in your mixer. And if you change the mixer, you always change it in the destination group first, then go to Options, Update Setup, Copy Mixer Settings to Sources. So any changes I make to EQs and sends. Changes to simple levels and pans, and you don't have to do that because they're automatically linked. So in other words, if I'm in the mixer in the destination and I come into winds and I raise this up to plus 4 dB and I go to source 1, you'll see it's already raised to plus 4 dB in source 1. So those are all linked. All your pans and fades and mutes are linked. Phase is linked, all those kind of things. The effects and sends are not linked. So if I add a fade, if I add an effect or a send, I then have to use the copy mixer setting to sources. That's very simple. Let's say I put a send in here. So I'm going to put a send to send strings over to reverb. So I send it to the reverb channel there. Okay. Now you see there's a send for strings over to reverb. But if I go to source, it's not there. So to update that, I now just go to Update Setup, Copy Mixer Settings to Sources. Okay, it's done. It's instantaneous. Now if I go look, that send is in each track group now. Okay? So anytime you update an effect or a send, you do that. Otherwise, the faders are linked. So now we're ready to load audio. So to load audio, I simply go to the File menu and I go to Load Audio Files. It now tells us there are 180 takes in that directory. Let's say I want to load takes 1 to 40. Click OK. It's now loading them, and each of those is 15 tracks, so that's loaded 600 files. Zoom to the track. There are your 40 takes. They're all loaded. You can now drag them to any source group you want. No matter where you put them, the sound is going to be identical. If I play them here or here, sounds exactly the same because the mixers are the same. Okay? And now we can start doing our source destination editing. So that's all there is to setting up and loading in Cohler Classical.